All right, so we're going to talk about going from design to code in seconds today. Basically, I've got a handful of slides. I want to stick to some demos. The idea is I'll show you a few different products that are options that you have to do this sort of stuff. If you're working with web or design teams or trying to do like handoffs from like design over to code, all these things come into play, especially today with all this modern software and all the expectations from digital transformation and things like that. So my name's Jason Beres. I've been at Infragistics here for going on 20 years almost, managed the products. There's my contact information. If there's anything that you want to follow up with afterwards, give me an email or a call and, let's talk about it. So we'll talk about today's challenges and really more just on this low code and sort of some of the things that you can do today. It's not a low code talk necessarily, but just more design to code. Like, hey, low code kind of means many things to many people or different things to many people. But a lot of the times what we're dealing with is getting from some sort of a design into something useful. So how do we actually do that? And how can we make that easier? So if we look at really a lot of the challenges today, all of the folks on the call today are developers or designers, and they hear this stuff all the time. Building software is complex. It takes a lot of time. It costs a lot of money. It's more complex today because the commoditization of really software due to app store-like experiences has made it so that everything that you build and deliver must be this amazing end user experience, right? Even internal IT apps have to be so awesome, so beautiful, have such a great experience, or you lose the business. So no longer can you have this sort of developer ugly, Visual Basic 6 looking app, or basically a WPF app with a theme slapped on it, that you're just deciding where things go because they'll fit. People want a good user experience. They want a good workflow. They want applications today at work to be as easy as the applications that they use at home, like for banking, for example. And so you can see a lot of these statistics here. And a lot of the reason tools exist today, like these design to code tools, is because they're trying to help you eliminate bugs, which is really what costs the most. So bugs are what kill us in terms of maintenance, in terms of dissatisfaction, in terms of just reworking the same old thing over and over again. So what can we use to eliminate some of those bugs? And really that's where design to code comes in, and anything that can help you not write code yourself, but automate the type of code that you write. So when you talk about low code, no code, and I know there's some talks today at the Code Camp about low code and about no code, and there's like a whole SD Times actually now has a whole low code, no code day where all they do is have presentations on low code and no code tools, which is actually pretty useful and pretty good. But low code is really about being able to use tools that you're still handing off and development teams can still use, right? So they need to do something that's useful, that isn't spaghetti code, it isn't a black box, that your product team can then take and then do something with, but it saves a lot of effort up front. So historically in the last, maybe 5-7 years, a lot of this has been around design tools that are giving developers code snippets and things like that. I'm going to show you some of that today. No code is really like, hey, this is just going to create the whole app. I don't really have to write any code. I don't even care what it looks like underneath. As long as it gives me the outcome, I don't need actually a developer to be involved at all. So no code tools, I categorize like OutSystems is a good no code tool. There's other ones like Betty Blocks and others. Power Apps is actually a no code tool, though Microsoft says it's low code. But at the end of the day, you don't have to write any code in Power Apps to get a completely functional working application. And I would argue that their target market is really people who shouldn't be writing code. It's the citizen developer. It's folks like that that you don't really want writing code. So based on the tool that you're using, the definitions might ebb and flow a little bit, but in general, this is what you should expect from low code and no code, and that's kind of what goes into this design to code story. So when we think about why we should use these, the biggest thing in management's mind is saving time and money. So, you know, at the code camp today, there's lots of guys that are consultants, and they're just one man company. And then there's folks that work for big companies, right? And so no matter what end of the spectrum you're on, saving time and money is your primary goal when it comes to your most precious resource, which is your time. So if you can spend a lot less time doing something and either charge the same or just get more projects done faster, that's really your goal. So a lot of research has been done on the spectrum of these low code, no code tools. And, you know, research shows us that between 50% and 90% of reduced development time can be gained when you use tools like this, which of course has key outcomes like, oh, my team's more productive. We shorten our time to market. We have higher quality code because the tool did the code. We didn't have to write it ourselves. And so anytime you can reduce the human touching it, 9 times out of 10, you're going to have less bugs. It's not going to be guaranteed, but that's the case. And then the big thing for everyone at the code camp today is that from a design to code, low code tool perspective, the wave has started, right? So no matter what, in 5 years, in 7 years, you're going to be using tooling like this. Many of you are using it today already. So design to code and low code really means that productivity tooling for developers just gets accelerated over the next 5 to 7 years to where it just becomes commonplace that if you're not using a tool, then you're probably falling behind. A good example of this is, you know, things that have evolved over the last 10 years, 15 years. So like Entity Framework. Entity Framework is great. It takes but a lot of code to write database access stuff. You use EF Power Tools, you can just like automatically generate thousands of lines of code in 1 second that you don't have to write. And that code is perfect. It's perfect CRUD code. You don't have to worry about it. It's always going to work. And so Microsoft said, you know, hey, we got kicked around a lot on Entity Framework. People were saying they didn't want to use it. It was too slow, blah, all these excuses. So if you notice in the keynote for .NET 6, they're like, hey, we've increased the performance, you know, 100-fold. It went from 200 and some thousand transactions per second to like 500 or 600. I don't know. The number was huge. So they're eliminating that back end thing about the performance of it, but they're also giving you tooling on the front end that could probably save you days and days of work just writing database code. So tooling has always been there, but a lot of it has been maybe on the back end or things that you didn't really consider as, hey, is this really a low code tool? Well, it is helping you write less code, so it kind of is. And you're just going to see more and more of this, but although on the user interface side and tools that will accelerate that UI design, not necessarily the back end. So today what you're going to see in my demos is that the successful low code tools, these design to code solutions, are tools that are bringing together different capabilities. And one of those capabilities are design tools like Sketch, Figma, Adobe XD. Within those design tools, there are features that allow you or allow designers to create components. And those component sets are usually represented in what's called a UI kit. So there's UI kits for all of those tools. But if you like look at IBM's Carbon design system, you'll see UI kits for IBM Carbon, SAP Fiori, design kits for SAP Fiori. So all of these controls are actually in the design tool. Now, the problem with the majority of those UI kits is they're missing the actual real developer component on the other end. So the productivity that we see in the future that everyone is going to gain from is when you can marry what a designer does and what a developer has. So how can we bring these two sides together, maybe with tooling, with automation, with transformation that actually gives you something that you could say, yeah, this is good enough for me then to take as a developer and either add to it, modify, do whatever you have to do on the custom code side. So we're all used to writing very custom applications, very data-driven applications. So what does that actually mean when it comes to this sort of tooling? And that's what I want to show you today. Some examples of maybe one extreme end or one more common end, which is just the design end, but then marrying that with the developer end. So the vendors that I'm going to kind of talk about today, and I'm going to maybe add another one or two in my demos, but I've got 4 kind of slots here for like the big players in the market in terms of design or design to code stories. On the left-hand side, Adobe XD. Adobe XD, probably 50% of the folks on the phone, their designers are using Adobe XD at their company. Super popular, but sort of late to market. Adobe XD is it's a great vector design tool. It has the capability to build UI kits. You can do prototyping in it. You can share those prototypes with your users. And there's plugins to make it work with other tools. InVision is very much the same way. One of the problems with Adobe XD is that you don't have this end-to-end UI control thing. You don't have user testing or usability studies. And anything that you design, if you give your Adobe XD file to a developer, you're not going to be able to say, hey, give me Blazor code or give me Angular code or React code. There's nothing going on there. But through the use of plugins with third-party tools, like you'll see in my demo today, you can achieve some of that. Figma is something that probably a lot of your teams have been looking at more recently. Figma is one of the newer players on the block here, but what they did really wisely is they built their product for extensibility since day one. So the nice thing about Figma is while they don't have built-in design to code, like take my design and then they've got controls and give you something on the other end, they do let you do things like create your own controls inside of GitHub, and they will marry those controls into their designer. So while there's a bunch of upfront work to make all this kind of come together, if you're in an enterprise or if you're even in a small team and this is the direction that you want to go, Figma does have some good options there. The problem is it's not really built in. It takes a bunch of work to do this. Again, no user testing, no design to code extensions necessarily. And yeah, the same thing is Adobe XD. Now, Sketch has been around for probably the longest out of all of these tools. It has a very large user base. But the problem with Sketch is that Figma sort of stole its thunder over the last few years because Figma had such extensibility. Sketch, while it's a great tool and it's widely used, it doesn't have some of the features that Figma does. And all of the extensibility and extensions written on Sketch are based on their file format, which means if I do a design, that you get the file format and you kind of a little bit on your own figuring out what to do with that file format. So if they change something, you need to make sure you're in sync. It's not like an API-driven file format, where Adobe XD, on the other hand, their file formats actually have an API, so they're backward compatible. So if you write plugins, you're probably guaranteed that that won't break. Where Sketch, if you just go for it and write some plugins and they upgrade to Sketch, version 90, and they change their file format, everything breaks. And at Infragistics, we've gone through that several times with Sketch. It's a little frustrating. And then the other thing about Sketch, the actual design tool itself is Mac only. So you can't use it in the web or the desktop to design, but you can view designs on the web now. And I'm going to show you that today and how their design to code works. And then finally, App Builder. which I'm going to demo today, is a more complete design to code system where we're really bringing together UI kits, design systems, and tooling that helps you get usable code out the back end. So if you are interested in doing any of these things, you're going to get an idea today of what they look like, where to start, and all that. And that's really where I'm going to focus my demos. So, and if everyone on the phone could mute, I'm kind of hearing someone sometimes, I'm not sure who, but it'll help everyone that's listening. So what I'm going to do here is open up my browser. And because I was about to reboot, I actually closed all the stuff that I had worked up and working already. But I'm going to go to Sketch first and give you an idea of what Sketch looks like. So I'm going to close this artboard and I'm going to click the back button here. So Sketch as a vector design tool lets designers build really rich and complex user interfaces, you know, with their design tools. So if you think about what we're using in Visual Studio or whatever, they're dragging and dropping, for the most part, primitives like squares and lines and circles and text areas, and then they're creating designs. So what Sketch allows you to do, though, with their new cloud service is they've added this inspector tool. So the inspector tool will take the designs that are in the Sketch cloud and then allow a developer to get more information about what they're looking at. So as I click around, you can see that I'm getting heights and widths. Over on the right-hand side, I'm getting more information on where things are at, things like opacity. If I'm clicking around more on things like this text box, I'm getting even more information like color, typeface, etc. So from a design to code perspective, if you get a Sketch file, you do have a little bit of leg up, for lack of a better word, that will give you some information to get started. It won't generate any HTML. It won't give you any C# code or anything like that, but it does give you enough information that you can move forward and get started with this design, and then do your own spacing and sizing and things like that. So this is called a markup tool, and all of the majority of the capabilities today from design to code are really based on these markup tools that a developer can then use to grab assets out. Now, if I go back and let me see if I can get something here and go to the inspector, like in this case, yeah, I was trying to find an example of an image, but there's no images here. So if you're using images, you can download those image assets. So then people can actually, our developer can actually take that and move it into an application. But at Infragistics, we use Sketch, we use Adobe XD, we use a bunch of different tools. And so this, which starts out as a design, even without being able to get HTML, if you'll see this product here is called Slingshot. If I go to Slingshot, let me open this guy up. Here's my slingshotapp.io, and I'll go to analytics, and let me close that out. I'll just go to my samples here. But that dashboard was designed, or the experience of the dashboard was designed using a tool like Sketch. So we took this and we got the colors from the design team, the spacing and everything, and you can see what the outcome actually looks like. So we're using these tools internally to generate that pixel perfect experience that you would expect. So even though you might be saying, well, I need code, you don't always need code if the tool doesn't give it to you. It'll give you enough information to keep moving. Now, another tool similar to this is called Figma. Figma is the one that I said was a little bit more advanced. I'm going to go to this prototype here in Figma, and it's a very similar experience. A lot of these tools look the same, so you don't have to like relearn what's going on. But this is just a trial version of Figma. I'm going to go to zoom to 100% or maybe zoom to 50%. Let's see here. And usually with these tools, as you hold the space bar down, and you can drag and move around. But you can see here it's the same deal. So I'm clicking on these components, and on the right-hand side, I'm getting information on the component, like the height, the width, the XY, etc. If I go to inspect, this tool is a little bit richer. So if I go to this button, I can actually get CSS code out of this. I can get iOS code out of this from a snippet. And there's other, and this is what I meant about Figma, where they're a little bit more advanced. You could probably find in their store, or you could write your own extension to do your own language. So this by default, or I forget if I added a plugin or not. I might have added the plugin. I'm not an expert on Figma, but you do get iOS or Android code. What you don't get is the whole screen or the whole application. So that's also part of the problem with these guys, is that while this is super useful, especially when you don't know how to code it, you're not getting the whole thing, right? But really what you want is, hey, can I get the whole screen for this? And then I can just kind of splat it into my application. So while super useful, and as you can see, I'm clicking on items here. These are actually rectangles with text, but they're higher level components that you can add to a screen. So I just added this higher level component to a screen, and I'm getting some information here in the property editor. It is still quite useful. Designers use these. This is what they live by. And what they would do is they would add a UI kit. So they might create a custom UI kit for your company, or they would use an existing UI kit, and then those UI kits would be used to create these applications. So Sketch, Figma, very close. Now Adobe XD, again, very similar application. Let's open up Adobe XD. By the way, I highly recommend, if you have not tried these products, that you go download their trials or start a trial. It's super easy. Log in with your Gmail or whatever. It just logs you right in. You get a trial, 14-day or 30-day, because they are pretty useful, and they might help you in your job if you're not used to using any design tools like this. Now, Adobe XD is actually pretty cool because it also has this rich plugin capability, very similar to Figma. So here is a prototype. This is a people application, and this I'm going to kind of take into one of the app builder examples that I wanted to show you, is that this again is built using UI kits. So the UI kits have these higher level components, like this is actually a list item, and then the list item has properties on the right hand side that you can set as you're creating these screens. At the same time, you can get additional information through inspecting the actual component. So there's a lot of capability here, not only in terms of drag and drop, not only in terms of prototyping, but in terms of the extensibility. So what we did for Adobe XD is we actually created a plugin that allows you to take your designs and then turn them into Angular or Blazor applications. So if I go here to plugins and I go to Indigo Design, this is our plugin at Infragistics. We have a product called Indigo Design. We have a product called App Builder. I can click this Create New App button. So instead of just settling for my inspection with a little code snippet, if I click Create New App, I'm already logged in, so I don't have to log in again. And I'm going to say People App Philly, and I'm going to create the app. What this will do is it'll take this design, stick it up to our cloud, and then it'll dump it into our App Builder application. And then the App Builder is actually giving you all of the Angular or Blazor code for this screen. So you can see here, this is a Razor page, and there's really no code in this guy, so the code thing is empty. If I change from Blazor to Angular, I've got the Angular code here, so there's TypeScript, CSS, etc. If I click the edit button, I'm back into a tool which is very similar to what Adobe XD, Sketch, Figma look like, which you just saw, where if I click on elements, I have a property editor. I've got a DOM layout editor, so it will help me actually kind of pull this stuff together and see how it works. But again, the difference between App Builder, Figma, Sketch is that App Builder is a design to code tool. So it'll take your design, it'll generate code, but from a developer perspective, it also has a toolbox, right? So I can do something like, let me go ahead and search for a button control or something like that. I can go ahead and add a button control. And well, this is it's actually a card lay or stack layout. So it's actually properly laying out my button. But here I've got a button, and now that just becomes part of this application. And if I go to my preview, I can go see that that button was actually added into my application. So there's the button that I actually added to the screen sitting right there. So if I take this application, which again was just in Adobe XD, and I add a couple capabilities to it, I'm going to go here to my home page. And let's say when someone clicks on this button, I want to navigate to the edit page. So I'll navigate to the edit person page. And if someone clicks this button here, I want to navigate to the add person page. And on the edit person, if someone clicks cancel, I'll add an interaction to go back to people home. And basically what we're doing here is we're sort of pulling together some developer capabilities and features, as well as designer capabilities and features inside of a single tool. Now, the reason that we can do that at Infragistics is because we've got the design system with the UI kits, we've got the UI components, and then we've got the tooling in the middle. So this App Builder tool kind of brings everything together for you. So if you're working with a design team and you're looking to get more usable code and accelerate some of that development, what you really want to do is say, hey, can you take a look at the UI kit from Infragistics and see if we can maybe modify it to work within Adobe XD or Sketch or whatever we happen to be using? Because the benefit is on the other end of that, I end up with a lot of components. So if I look here at our Angular page, and just so you can see all of these UI controls, if I scroll down, basically all of these UI controls end up being in the toolbox of a WYSIWYG tool. So it's super powerful and super easy to use. Now, if I just go to App Builder on its own, so let me go back to Infragistics. Let me go here. Let me go to App Builder. To get started with this thing, we give you a bunch of different sample apps or empty states or whatever you want to use. So for example, if I click New App, there's some empty layouts you can use. You can pick one of our sample apps, or you can import Adobe XD or Sketch. So here, if I go to like this example of a people app, it's a little bit different than the one you just saw. I've got this nice application here. It's basically a single page application, master detail. This was created by just, basically doing a WYSIWYG drag and drop from the toolbox onto the form, and you're just building stuff just like you would any other application in Visual Studio. But the nice thing here is, since this is the Philly Code Camp and it's a big .NET sort of audience, I can create a Blazor application with this. I can publish it to GitHub or download the zip. So I am going to leave this app just the way it is and just show you a couple things here. So this home button, you saw my navigation earlier on the lower right. That's going to navigate to this home screen here. And then this My Info is going to navigate to this My Info screen here. So I'm going to download this zip file, and this just downloaded a Blazor file or a zip file. I'm sorry. So I'm going to extract this, extract all. And what this does is it gives me an entire Blazor application. So I got my www root. I've got my different pages. So this is exactly what you would have built yourself inside of Visual Studio. So if I open this guy up, the difference is all of that WYSIWYG drag and drop maybe took, I don't know, maybe an hour to build that app. If I run this guy, it will give me exactly what the application was. So this is all real Blazor code. Oops, let me move this over to this side. And you can see that this is my application. These are all real buttons. My navigation works. So everything that we had in the design actually gets translated into real code. So I don't have any of these other screens or created. This is like a tab component or a nav component. But you can see that through this sort of low code tooling, my screen's created. Now I can go ahead and say, all right, give me, you know, let me add my own authentication or authorization or validation or whatever the heck else I need to do for my own domain specific work. Now, one of the neat things about this is we also support, obviously, Angular. We will link into GitHub. So in this case, if I took this Blazor app and I linked into GitHub and I just said PHL camp and I created this repository. So now it's going over to GitHub. It's going to create this repo. I can publish this to GitHub. We don't have support for Azure yet, but it's in the backlog. You can see here's my public, and you guys can go find this yourself and inspect the code yourself. But if I go to my pages, I go to my Razor page, you can see that this is all valid Razor code. Now, the nice thing about this is I can grab this, I can open up Visual Studio Code, I can Command-Shift-P this guy, let's do a git clone. Let's clone this repository. I can stick it right there. Let's open this guy up. And if we go to terminal, do terminal, I can do a .NET build and then a .NET run. And this guy will just do exactly what I just did. I can open this in Visual Studio or I can open it anywhere else. So the power of having this linked into source control gives you some pretty cool stuff. So let's see. I haven't tried this yet in a while, so let's do .NET Run. I think this should work, which is pretty slick. Let's see. We'll give it a second. Now we'll if it pops up, we'll know because it'll take over my screen. So now if I go back to my app builder here, I want to show you a couple other things. I'm going to go ahead and create. Actually, I'm going to delete this guy. I'm going to create a new screen here. So in this same exact app, I'm going to add another child view, and we're just going to call this, customer list. One of the things that is important is data binding. So most of the applications, and I've been in Infragistics for almost 20 years, most of the applications I see have a menu on the left, and there's like a big data grid, or 4 data grids, or 1 data grid, 1 data chart, or 25 tabs, and each tab has a data grid, right? It's grid, 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 grid. So we also support linking into REST APIs, and then we're like adding a bunch of capabilities in the future that will help you take this design. So your design team gave you this, or whatever it happens to look like, and then you want to save all that time doing this and then add more capabilities. So in this case, if I go to my toolbox again and I do a search for grid, let me grab this data grid, and I'm just going to make it 100 pixels wide. I'll make it 100 pixels high, or 100% high, and there's my data grid. If I go over to my data tab, you can see I've got some data set up here. But if you want to use like live data or real data, but not connected to a database because this is a cloud app and you don't trust it, for example, we have this cool utility called Excel to JSON, and anyone can use this. Just go to excel2json.io. Super slick. It allows you to take any Excel file and convert it to JSON. So I'm going to go here to my downloads folder, grab this sample file here, and it uploaded it to the cloud. And then it's going to give me a spreadsheet on the left-hand side and then JSON on the right-hand side. So with this utility, if you ever wanted to just convert anything into JSON, this is the way to do it. And by the way, of course, I haven't used this file yet, but I'm guessing it's huge. That's 5 megabytes. It's doing a lot of parsing here, so sorry about that. In fact, let me kill that and let me upload another file here. So yeah, upload another file. I usually use a Northwind file. So in my desktop, I've got, well, we'll use this FinTech 2500 rows. So this is 2500 rows of data. And this is, we use it for like some financial services samples, but you can see as soon as I uploaded it, I've got all this JSON data on the right-hand side. So I'm just going to click Get Link, and it's creating a share link. I'm going to click Copy. I'm going to go back to this app builder, and I'm going to do a new data source, REST API, call it PHL, and you know, CodeCamp is my example. I'm going to add a URL here, paste this guy in, click Done. Now I get this dialog that says, hey, you know, what data do you want out of this thing? I'm going to say, give me all the data. It doesn't know like what some of the fields are, so we let you actually change the field type if you'd like. I call this FinData1, hit the Enter key, click Done. So now I've added this new data source, and you can see it over in my data source window. So if I grab my grid here and I go down to grid properties, I can change to that data. So now all of a sudden, there's my data. If I go to preview, you can see that you've got all the data sitting there, and we've auto-generated all the columns and all the properties and things like that. So let's go back here, or actually let's go back here. I'm going to go to my master view, and people here looks like it is disabled. So I'm going to make it enabled. And I'm going to say, I want you to go to my customer list now. So if I test this and I go to preview and I go home and I go to people, it's going to go to this customer list. So that's pretty nice. And then the other thing that I want to do is I don't like the grid to be white. So I'm going to go to my theme tab here, and I want it to look a little bit different. So that's how it would look, dark, maybe with a different font. Actually, let's see. Let's go to our custom themes. Do we change it here? Maybe if you don't want to use one of these themes, you can create your own theme, change color typography. You can basically control how everything looks. So let's just do a dark theme to give us a little contrast. And now when I preview the application and I go home, you can see the entire application now has the new theme. It looks awesome. Let's go to edit. I'm going to download this guy again, download the zip file. I don't really know what happened to my my other .NET Run guy, so we're just going to stick to Visual Studio for now. But let's extract this. Let's open this up in Visual Studio, and here we are. App loads. If we go to pages, you'll see that I got my customer list here. Customer list is great. It's got all the stuff there, but the nice thing is it added all of the stuff for HTTP client. So it said, hey, you've got this data source. You want the data to come from this URL. So there's the URL. We're going to generate that code for you. So you don't have to worry about, oh, what am I going to do to get my code to work? We're going to generate that code for you. And one of the features of .NET is it allows you to take that JSON, parse it, and put it right into an object array. So it makes it super easy. So now if I run this guy, I will be connected to real data. Whoa, what happened? Something's not loaded. Huh. That's a bummer. Is that because of my thing not working here? Oh, something got hosed. Well, what we're going to do then is something went wrong with Blazor. There's one thing I want to check. Let me go to my NuGet packages and make sure that everything is installed. So that's installed. That's installed. These updates really don't matter. But unfortunately, I don't know why that didn't work. Blazor code generation is in beta at the moment as an FYI. So maybe we did something there that's not going to let it work. But at the same time, if I go back to my browser and minimize this guy back up, and I'm going to go over to App Builder. Let me go ahead and move it over to Angular. So if there's any Angular folks here, they'll appreciate this, which I'm sure there's lots of Angular folks. Let me go back to my customer list. And what I wanted to show you is that this grid is a little bit boring. You can actually add different features to it. So if I go here to the feature selector, I'm just going to go ahead and click all of the common stuff that you would usually add to your own applications that you give to your users, right? So, you know, pinning, grouping, column summaries, all these other things. I mean, this is your normal data grid that you would do. And I'm going to change my page size here to, let's say, 250, because we have 2,500 rows, so we'll get 10 pages back. And now when I preview this, you can see that my grid looks beautiful. I've got all these features, looks great. I can interact with it. But what I really want to do is I want to publish this to GitHub. So I'm going to give this, well, yeah, you know what I did wrong here is I actually made the mistake of, let me do pick a repository. I'm going to do a new repository. I'm going to call PHL Angular because the other repository is Blazor, and I don't want to screw that up. So let's do PHL Angular, create this repo, and we will publish this guy to the repo, and we will open him up real quick here, loading, boom. There is our Blazor application, or I'm sorry, our Angular, and here is our application. And one thing you'll notice here is there's a new folder introduced with Angular called Services. So the service is very similar to what we did in our code block in Blazor. So we're actually figuring out the right code to generate. And all of this is like production ready, good code. So if we go here to customer list and I go to the customer list component, this is the column definitions. And you can see we've got some templates in here. We've got our toolbar. All the properties are set. If I look at, you know, the code behind the TypeScript for this guy, we're actually calling our service. We're importing all of our stuff. So this is how you would actually create the app yourself. So let's go ahead and grab this Git guy here. Let me open Visual Studio Code. I'm going to close this folder. I'm going to do a new Git clone. And I'm going to paste this guy in. And so here I am again. Instead of Blazor, I am here in Angular. And what do we do in Angular apps? We do an npm install. So npm install is going to install all of our dependencies. If you're not familiar with Angular, this is like right click, go to NuGet, add your NuGet dependencies. The difference between npm and Angular is, you know, they're both repositories. You can mix and match, of course, but something like an Angular app has like a ton of tiny little dependencies. So there might be like, you know, 500 different dependencies just for Angular to run. And then when you compile it, it actually does what's called tree shaking. It removes all the stuff that doesn't matter. So from going, you know, from like an application into a production application or a dev to production, your application bundles get much smaller and they're much easier to work with. So I'll just do an ng serve and I'm going to make this open up. And this is actually going to go through and compile everything that we actually just did. So then we'll have our Angular app running, and it'll actually open up. Now, one of the things I wanted to highlight, because a lot of the folks on the phone are getting a design from their design team. You've got Sketch, you've got Figma, you've got Adobe XD. For tools like Sketch and for tools like Adobe XD, we have the entire design to code, where you can design something in Sketch, design in Adobe XD, and then generate code. So this is the same app that would have been designed in Adobe XD or Sketch, and we're just generating the code. So here I said, give me Angular out of it, and now I have the same experience. Here's the Angular application. Here's my data grid. I can do a group by here. I've got my, Excel style filtering. I can show and hide columns like so. I can pin columns to the left-hand side. And now I've got a grid with pinned columns. But all of this is done for me for free. All I did was drag and drop. So this is going back to being able to build an application like you used to in Windows Forms or Visual Basic, or even WPF, but although in the web. So you've got all these WYSIWYG tools from the design side all the way to the code side. So it's actually pretty slick. The nice thing here is even theming. Like I've got my own theming. And if let me do a group by here. I'm going to group by country. And then within each country, I want to know the settlements. And actually, I'm going to take region and group by region as well. I'll stick region up here like so. But I want country to be over there, which is good enough. Now I'm going to export this to Excel. And we don't just export the raw CSV. We are actually exporting the hierarchical view of that data. So that's just another feature of the product. And you can see here, I've got all 2,500 of my rows. And I have not written a single line of code. All I did was either take something from a design file and get it into code, or I did a little drag and drop and got it into code. One feature that we are in a sort of a beta mode right now is the ability for you to link into a web API. So let me go here. I'm going to do a new app, and I'm just going to do this blank screen here, use this layout. And I'm going to hit Control E, which brings up my little toolbox kind of in place. And I'm going to do the same thing on the grid, 100% height and width, 100% here. So let's say you got your design file and you actually have real data and you've already created a web API. So what I did is I created a web API here, and this guy is sitting up in Azure. So if I go and I log into my my Azure account, you can see that I've got a bunch of resources, and let me go to all resources. So I've got two things here. I've got this API app, and this is an API app that I deployed yesterday. It's called northwindazurewebsites.net. And then I've also got a database called, it's a SQL Server database, and it's just Northwind. It's the same thing. Now in Visual Studio, if you're not familiar with how easy this is to do, I'm going to open up Visual Studio. Whoops. And I'll show you real quick. So let me go to Visual Studio. Come on, Windows 11. I will open up my Northwind Cloud app. And this is my Northwind Cloud app. And if you've never used Entity Framework Power Tools, this will convince you to use Entity Framework Power Tools. So all of this code that I generated here was done by right-clicking, going to EF Core Power Tools, clicking Reverse Engineer, selecting my database, my local database, which is the same schema as my Azure in the cloud, and then it just generated all this code for me. I didn't have to do anything. And then in app settings, program CS. What I did is I just used the standard MVC mapping syntax to point to what I wanted to return when someone went to this URL. And in order to get a nice test UI, I told it to use Swagger, which Swashbuckle Swagger is a default now within .NET Core 6 API app, so you don't have to think about it. So here, if I go back to my my Swagger page, which is here somewhere, Windows 11 has this issue with top level Windows. It is the most annoying thing. Like, why doesn't it open when you click something? I just don't get it. Oh, now magically, well, no, I clicked that up, so it did that itself. But here, if I go to like customers, so let me go to customers, and I click try it out, and I click execute. This is actually executing my API app on Azure, and it's returning back to me my data. So this is live, real data. So what you can do is what you get out of this is something called a Swagger definition. So I'm going to copy the Swagger definition, which is in it's a JSON representation of my API, and I'm going to go to this URL. It's where is it? I might have closed it. That's okay. Let me go back and open a new instance of the browser and go to this Sandbox App Builder Sandbox. So it's called App Builder Demo Sandbox, and I'm going to do a new app. Use this layout. Just like I was going to do before. On view 1, I'm going to delete this content. I'm going to add a data grid just to do this really quick. So there's my data grid. I'll just kind of manually resize it. By the way, you can change like absolute, fixed, relative positioning. It's really up to you. I'm going to go to data, click plus, REST API. Now we have this new thing here called Swagger. So let me add the Swagger URL, and I'm going to say, go grab that Swagger guy. And there's my swagger.json file. Now I'm going to select the endpoints. Now your entire API is lit up here. So what I want to do here is I am going to paste that again, and I'm going to change this to, let's see, I think I just changed it to that. It just needs the base URL. So now I'm going to go to customers, click send, success. It's anonymous, so there's no other information here, but I want to select customers. I'm going to select this data, select all, click done. Now this is beta. If you go to this to play around with it, feel free to go to appbuilder-demo-sandbox-indigo design. You get this incomplete. Just click finish setup, select endpoints, select data, done, and it kind of goes away. It's just a bug. But now if I go down here, there's my customers API. So it's the same thing we just did. But although now this is connected to a real API up in Azure, and I have the same capability. So there's my grid. Let's go ahead and add a bunch of features to it. Pretty slick, pretty awesome. Grouping, moving, pinning, resizing. All this is lit up. If I really don't want to do something like paging, so in something like this, I'll just click the X and it closes. If I go to preview, there's my data. So this is actually live data pulling from the cloud with me writing no code. So with that, I think we're out of time. Let me go back to the slide deck. I will jump to the last slide here. Hopefully you guys got a good understanding of how this stuff works today. And I know I spent more time on App Builder, but I think App Builder is the coolest thing in the world. If you go to Infragistics and click App Builder, you can start a trial. And if you're attending the code camp, shoot me an email and you'll get a discount as well in the future if you want to actually use it. So
I heard a rumor that you might give away a license to your products.
Oh, yeah. So I guess I'm supposed to do that in this talk, right?
Yeah. So I'm going to say there's only 5 people left.
All right. Everyone gets a free license. If there's only 5 left, you guys stuck it out. Send me or Bill your email, and my email is jasonb, and everyone gets a free license. So there's no excuse for you not to try this out.
Do I see like any happy faces or hearts or anything for this?
Yeah, let's see. Let's see who's paying attention.
I think they all turned you off.
Yeah, they're like, oh my God, this guy, what's he talking about?
No, this is great. This is absolutely amazing.
All right, so please capture Jason's email address.
Yep.
And I see 5 people, Jason. So I think that'd be excellent for you. I think what you're doing here is so impressive. You know, I'm fascinated. I'd be fascinated to see how it actually writes Blazor code, but I guess it knows your components, so it knows how to dance around all that stuff.
Yep, and we're doing a bunch of stuff, like talking to a bunch of people who are like in the Blazor crowd to make sure that that generated code is something that they would accept. Because that's the thing. If it passes the sniff test of the best of us, then you know, they'll use it. If it's garbage, they won't use it. But yeah, Bill, make sure you get your free license too. So thank you everyone so much. I really appreciate you all sticking around. And yeah, I'll post this slide deck up into the files, and you know, I look forward to getting your feedback on what we're doing here and for you guys trying everything out. So Joe, it's Jason B, JAS. In fact, let me copy this and I'll stick it right in the chat. So there we go. Paste Jason B. It's in the chat. Yeah. Whoops, sorry. There we go. And now you've got it. So I look forward to hearing from you guys. I'll get you a free license, and enjoy the rest of the Code Camp. And Bill, thank you so much for including me in your thread to talk today. I really appreciate it.
Good seeing you again, Jason.
Yep, I'll see you, Bill. Thanks. Bye-bye.